Do you ever feel like you're doing all the right things for your health, but you're still not seeing the results you want? You're definitely not alone. And honestly, I think it's because so much of the information that we've been given about what's actually healthy and what's not is just plain wrong. Because the truth is that there are a lot of so called healthy foods out there that are actually really bad for us. They're full of sugar and artificial ingredients and all sorts of other junk that is totally wreaking havoc on our bodies and especially on our gut health. And gut health, in case you don't know, is a big deal. It is actually one of the most important factors in your overall health and well being, and something that has a huge impact on your ability to lose weight and keep it off. So, today, I want to dive into this topic of gut health and specifically talk about some of the more surprising foods that most of us think of as healthy that are in reality wrecking your gut and wreaking havoc on your health. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about what you can do to start reversing some of the damage and get your gut health back on track. Welcome to the Feel Better, Live Free podcast brought to you by Thinlicious. I'm your host, Ruth Sukup, and here we'll talk about everything from the science of weight loss to practical tips for making your health a priority in the midst of a busy life. It's a little bit nerdy, a little bit funny, and a little bit revolutionary. So buckle up, friend, because it's about to get real. Hey there, and welcome back to the Feel Better, Live Free podcast. Once again, my name is Ruth Sukup, and I'm the founder of Thinlicious and the Thin Adapted System, as well as the New York Times bestselling author of 7 books. And I'm also a 46-year-old woman who, until just a few years ago, really struggled with my weight and with eating well for a big part of my adult life. And so, if this is your first time listening to this podcast, the first thing I want you to know is that I get it. I know what it's like to feel completely overwhelmed by all the conflicting advice about what you should and shouldn't eat. I know what it's like to feel totally addicted to sugar and all sorts of processed junk. I know what it's like to lose weight and then gain it back. And I know how frustrating it can be to try and try and try again without ever seeing any real or lasting results. And it's because I've been there that I'm so incredibly passionate about helping other women get healthy and lose weight in a way that actually works and that's sustainable for the long run. Because to me, this isn't even just about weight loss. Not really. It's about freedom. The freedom to look and feel your absolute best. The freedom to not be controlled by food addictions or to feel sick and tired all the time or to be caught up in the big lies that we've been fed by the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry and the weight loss industry and the media. It's about the freedom to pursue all of your other big goals and dreams because your health and your weight are no longer holding you back. And if you're new around here and this is your first time listening to the Feel Better, Live Free podcast, then let me say welcome and also tell you how excited I am that you found me and that you found this podcast. Because seriously, there is so much good stuff here. And I know it has the power to totally transform your life and your health. So if you haven't done it yet, be sure to subscribe to this podcast so that you don't miss a thing. And also, before we dive into today's topic, I just want to quickly tell you one thing that you can also download a free copy of our awesome free guide, which is the perfect companion to this podcast and will give you a better idea of what our system is all about and how it can help you lose weight and get healthy. You can grab a copy of that guide for free at thinlicious.com/guide. Once again, that URL is thinlicious.com/guide. So go and grab it because it's really good. All right, so with that out of the way, let's talk about gut health, one of my favorite topics, and why it's so important and what you might be doing to totally wreck it without even realizing it. So first things first, what is gut health and why is it so important? Well, if you're not familiar with the term, then you might not realize that your gut is simply another word for your digestive system. It's the part of your body that's responsible for processing the food that you eat, breaking it down into usable nutrients, and then eliminating the waste. And while that might sound pretty straightforward, the reality is that your digestive system is actually very complex. And it needs to be working properly in order for your body to function the way it's supposed to. In fact, your gut health affects so many different aspects of your health and well-being, from your immune system to your mental health and even your risk for developing chronic diseases like heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. It also has a huge impact on your ability to lose weight and keep it off. So if you're struggling with any of those things, then one of the first places you'll want to focus on is your gut health. And yet, it's something that so many of us take for granted. We don't even give much thought to it at all. In fact, the modern American diet is so bad for our gut health, and it's causing so many problems that it has become a major public health issue. So, what's to blame? Well, a big part of the problem is all of the processed, packaged, and fast foods that make up for most of us the majority of what we eat. These foods are typically high in sugar, high in unhealthy fats, and full of all sorts of artificial ingredients and chemicals that are wreaking havoc on our digestive systems. And when your gut isn't healthy, it leads to a condition called leaky gut, which is basically what it sounds like when the lining of your digestive system becomes permeable, meaning it has little holes in it, which allow toxic particles and bacteria and viruses to leak into your bloodstream. And this, in turn, causes all sorts of inflammation and autoimmune diseases and can make it nearly impossible to lose weight. And I know you might be listening right now and thinking, well, leaky gut sounds bad, but this can't possibly apply to me, right? But the reality is that leaky gut syndrome is actually far more common than any of us realize. It's estimated that as much as 70 to 80% of the population has some form of leaky gut, and most people don't even know it, right? They blame it on all these other things. That's because the symptoms can be vague, they can be wide-ranging, and that makes it really hard to pinpoint leaky gut specifically as the root cause of health issues, but most likely it is. And chances are, if you're struggling with your weight, gut health issues are at least partially to blame. And while junk food is one of the biggest culprits in this modern gut health epidemic that we're facing, it's not just all the junk food that's to blame. There are actually a lot of so-called healthy foods out there that can be really bad for your gut health and are very much contributing to this explosion of leaky gut and other digestive issues. And a lot of times we don't even realize it because we've been told that these foods are good for us, right? When in reality, they're doing a whole lot of damage. So let's talk about some of these foods and why they're so bad for your gut. The first one that I want to talk about is one that I think a lot of people are going to be surprised to hear can be bad for your gut, and that's dairy and especially yogurt. Because for so long, we've been told that yogurt is a super healthy food that's great for our digestion, right? Well, not necessarily. And while it's true that yogurt contains beneficial probiotics, which are good for your gut, the problem is that most of the yogurt that you find in the grocery store is not actually the kind of yogurt that's good for you. Instead, it's usually packed with sugar and artificial flavors and sweeteners, all of which can be really bad for your gut health. In fact, some types of yogurt have more sugar in them than a candy bar. And all of that sugar is basically canceling out any of the good benefits you might get from the probiotics. But it's not just the sugar that's the problem when it comes to yogurt and other dairy products. Dairy is a common allergen for a lot of people, and it can cause a lot of digestive issues, everything from bloating and gas to diarrhea and constipation. And when you're trying to heal your gut, it's really best to avoid any foods that could be causing allergic reaction or other inflammation. Not only that, some dairy products also contain lectins, which are proteins found in certain plants that can be toxic to your gut lining. So even if you're not allergic to dairy, it could still be causing problems for your digestive system. That said, if you're a yogurt lover, there is still a way to enjoy it in a way that's good for your gut, right? You just want to look for plain, unsweetened yogurt, preferably full fat, unsweetened yogurt that's made from grass-fed milk and that contains live active cultures. And if that's not sweet enough for you, sweeten it naturally with a bit of fresh fruit or a drizzle of honey. Add your own toppings like nuts and seeds. You can make your own homemade granola. That way you get all of the benefits of the probiotics without any of the added sugar and artificial junk. It's also a good idea to focus on getting more sheep and goat dairy, which is way easier on your gut and is also high in natural MCT oil. But I would say dairy is probably the first thing that you would want to consider cutting out if you are experiencing gut issues. The next food that is often touted as being healthy, but is actually really bad for your gut most times, is whole grains, aka gluten, which is the protein that's found in wheat and other whole grains. And this is a tough one for a lot of people to hear because we've been so thoroughly indoctrinated to believe that grains are a necessary part of our diet and that they're good for us, but they're really not that great. And this is so funny because just the other day, my daughter brought home a bag of Sun Chips, and I was just laughing at the package because it makes it look like it's so healthy, right? Sun Chips, like this, they come from the sun and they're so good for you, right? It's very carefully marketed and very carefully designed to make people think that you're choosing a healthy alternative to potato chips. It even says heart healthy right there on the front of the bag. And it's the same thing when you walk down the cereal aisle, right? Almost every single package touts the fact that it's made with whole grains and is therefore heart healthy when the reality is actually anything but. Because the truth is that gluten is a very common allergen for a lot of people and causes all sorts of digestive issues, everything from bloating and gas to constipation and diarrhea. And it's been linked to leaky gut, inflammation, and autoimmune diseases like celiac disease and rheumatoid arthritis. And the really insidious thing about gluten is that it's in so many foods, right? Even in the ones that you wouldn't expect, things like salad dressings and sauces and medications and supplements. So if you're trying to avoid gluten, you have to be a careful label reader and pay close attention to what's in the foods that you're eating. That said, if you are worried about your gut health or you're trying to heal your gut, it's a good idea to avoid gluten as much as possible and see if you notice any improvement in your symptoms. There are lots of gluten-free alternatives out there these days, and many of them are actually quite good, right? And if you're following our Thinlicious program, it's almost entirely gluten-free because we recommend cutting out most grains and most things that contain gluten anyways. You could and that's what you could do as well, right? You can try cutting out grains altogether, replacing them with healthier low carb options like vegetables, fruits, proteins. And it might sound tough at first, but I promise you, your gut is going to thank you for it in the long run. So that's the second food to watch out for: whole grains and gluten. Another food that is often touted as being a healthy source of protein and fiber, but can still be really hard on your gut is legumes, right? So that includes things like beans and lentils and peanuts. And the reason for this is that legumes contain a type of carbohydrate called an oligosaccharide, which can be very difficult for your body to digest. This causes all sorts of digestive issues, including bloating and gas, most commonly. In fact, you've probably heard the old like little ditty that we used to sing as kids, right? Beans, beans, the magical fruit. The more you eat, the more well, you get the idea, right? And that's because it's true. Legumes can cause a lot of gas and discomfort for a lot of people. Not only that, legumes are high in lectins, which, as we mentioned earlier, can be toxic to your gut lining. So it's really no surprise that so many people actually have a lot of trouble with digesting legumes. If you're struggling with gut issues, the legumes are going to be really hard on it. So that doesn't mean that you have to cut out all legumes completely, right? If you love beans or lentils, there are ways to prepare them that can make them easier on your gut. You can soak them overnight before cooking, which can help to break down some of the hard to digest components and make them more gentle on your digestive system. You can also try adding in herbs and spices that aid in digestion, things like cumin or ginger, or adding in a little apple cider vinegar to the soaking water, which can help to further improve digestibility. And if legumes are just too much for your gut to handle, there are plenty of other sources of protein and fiber that you can turn to, right? Nuts and seeds and fruits and vegetables, meat can all provide you with the nutrients that you need without any of the digestive discomfort that comes with legumes. So watch out for legumes, the third so-called healthy food that could be wrecking your gut. The next food that's really bad for your gut and probably not all that surprising is diet sodas and other foods and drinks that contain artificial sweeteners. And I know this is a tough one for a lot of people to hear because diet sodas and other artificially sweetened foods are often seen as like the lesser of two evils, right? A healthier alternative to the regular versions that contain so much sugar. And if you're trying to lose weight, you may have even been told that diet sodas are a good way to satisfy your sweet tooth without all the extra calories. But the reality is that most artificial sweeteners are actually terrible for your gut health and for your health in general. In fact, studies have shown that artificial sweeteners can alter the composition of your gut bacteria and not in a good way. These sweeteners also increase your risk for obesity, for type 2 diabetes and other metabolic diseases. And even though they don't contain any calories, they still trick your body into thinking that it's getting sugar, which then causes all sorts of hormonal imbalances and insulin resistance. So there's nothing good about it, right? There's absolutely nothing good about these foods. So if you're serious about healing your gut and losing weight, then it's for the best to avoid artificial sweeteners as much as possible, particularly chemical sweeteners like aspartame, sucralose, and saccharin, right? Those are the really bad ones. Instead, much better to focus on any natural sweeteners, things like stevia, monk fruit, allulose, or even small amounts of raw honey or maple syrup in moderation, right? If you're trying to cut back on carbohydrates, you might want to stick to allulose or monk fruit. But I actually like using raw honey and maple syrup both as a sweetener because I am in phase 3. I'm in maintenance mode. I'm not trying to lose weight, so I definitely eat more carbohydrates. I did a whole episode on that not too long ago if you're interested in hearing. But just remember, just because something is marketed as diet food doesn't mean it's good for you, right? Especially when it comes to your gut health. So that's the fourth so-called healthy food that is wrecking your gut: diet soda and artificial chemical sweeteners. And finally, the last food that's really bad for your gut that you want to try and avoid as much as possible is vegetable oils, and especially the highly processed ones like canola, soybean, corn oil. And this is a tough one, honestly, because these oils are found in so many foods and used in so many restaurants for cooking and frying. But the reality is that vegetable oils are incredibly unhealthy, literally toxic, and can cause all sorts of problems for your gut and overall health. For one thing, all of these oils are high in omega 6 fatty acids and can cause inflammation in the body and lead to a whole host of health problems, from heart disease and cancer to depression and autoimmune diseases. And they disrupt the balance of bacteria in your gut and contribute to leaky gut syndrome. And the really insidious thing about vegetable oils is that they too are often marketed as being heart healthy when in reality they're anything but. So, if you want to improve your gut health and your overall health, it's best to avoid these oils as much as possible and instead opt for healthier alternatives like olive oil, coconut oil, and avocado oil instead. And if you want to know more about healthy fats versus unhealthy fats and what fats are healthy, definitely go back and listen to the episode that I recorded a few weeks ago, all about healthy fats, right? It lays it all out for you. But those are the 5 foods that are most likely wrecking your gut and wreaking havoc on your health: dairy, gluten, legumes, artificial sweeteners, and vegetable oils. And I know for a lot of people, these are probably the foods that you eat most often, right? The ones that you've been told are the healthiest for you, which is why it's so hard to wrap your head around the idea that they're actually causing so much damage. But the good news is that there are healthier alternatives out there, and you can start making changes to improve your gut health without giving up all the foods that you love. It just takes a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of effort to start making better choices. So, how do you do that? How do you start making better choices for your health and your gut? Well, we'll talk about that in just a second. But first, let's take a quick look at exactly what all of this damage to your gut health is actually doing to your body. Because it's one thing to know what foods are bad for your gut and why they're so bad, but if you don't actually understand the consequences of eating these foods, it can be really hard to find the motivation to change. So, I think it's helpful to just take a quick look at some of the most common signs that your gut health may be suffering and that it's time to start making some changes. So the first and most obvious sign that you may be experiencing a lot of digestive issues, things like bloating and gas and diarrhea or constipation. And I think a lot of times we sort of just accept these things as a normal part of life, or we blame them on other things like stress or hormones. But the reality is that they're often a sign that something is not right with your gut and it needs some help. Another common sign of poor gut health is food sensitivities and allergies. And this is because when your gut is leaky, it allows particles of undigested food to enter into your bloodstream, which triggers an immune response. And so you might notice that you have reactions to certain foods, right? Things like dairy or gluten, or that you get headaches or brain fog after eating certain things. You may also notice a lot of inflammation in your body or have joint pain and muscle aches. And this is because leaky gut leads to an increase in inflammatory markers in your blood, which causes all sorts of problems throughout your body. And speaking of inflammation, that can also manifest as skin issues, things like acne, eczema, psoriasis, Because your skin is your body's largest organ, it's often the first place that inflammation will start to show up. And then there's the issue of fatigue. So many of us are so tired all the time, and we rely on caffeine and sugar and other stimulants just to get us through the day. But the truth is that fatigue is often a sign that something is not right with your gut, because when your body has to work extra hard to digest all the junk that you're putting into it, it can really zap your energy. And this is especially true if you're not getting the right nutrients from your food. And finally, one of the biggest signs that your gut health may be suffering is that you're just having a really hard time losing weight and keeping it off. Because when your gut isn't healthy, it wreaks havoc on your hormones and especially on your insulin levels, making it nearly impossible for you to shed those extra pounds. So, if any of those signs sound familiar, then it's probably time to start taking your gut health a little more seriously and making some big changes to your diet. Luckily, if you've been listening to this podcast for any amount of time, you probably already know what I'm going to say about this. Focus on cutting out sugar and carbohydrates and all the refined, processed crap foods, and instead eating a diet that is high in nutrient dense protein, whole foods, and healthy fat. And while that's easy in theory, I know sometimes implementing it can feel overwhelming, right? Honestly, that's why our thin adapted system exists, to walk you through the changes that you need to make and to understand the science behind these changes so that you can actually heal your body from the inside out by reversing insulin resistance, balancing your hormones, and yes, healing your gut. Because when you do that, the weight loss is actually the easy part. It just happens naturally without dieting, without drugs, and without making yourself miserable. Because, like I said at the beginning, to me, this whole mission of helping women transform their lives by getting healthy is about so much more than just weight loss and fitting into your skinny jeans. It's about freedom. And when you heal your body, you feel free. So if you want more information about how to get started, once again, be sure to go check out our free guide. It's called Flip the Switch, and it's really helpful and it's very in-depth, and you can get it free at thinlicious.com/guide. Once again, that's thinlicious.com/guide. Okay, guys, I think that's about all I have for you today. Hopefully this was helpful. And if you know somebody who might benefit from this info, please be sure to pass it along. Then be sure to subscribe for future updates. And I will see you back here for another episode very soon.